Doctors have been in is anybody here a doctor situation. What happened? My father, doctor, 30 years ago was sent to work in southern Italy, although he already lived with my mother in the north, and a large part of the salary ended up in tickets to return by plane every weekend. The fact is that during the flight to the south, lasting about 1 hour, they do not give anything to eat except they pass with a trolley to give candies. Needless to say, the classic situation of the old woman who chokes on it and cannot breathe. My dad was called, and with a few heavy blows on the back he managed to get the candy out of the poor old woman. A week goes by and the day of the return on the plane comes. The trolley with the candies passes promptly, and out of nowhere a girl sitting in front of my father who was trying to get one is blocked by her friend. Don't take it. Last week they told me that an old woman got choked up and to free her a doctor had to slap her really hard on the back. Quote, I like the thought of an Italian flight where everyone panics, but they find a doctor, and he assesses the situation very carefully and he chooses not to use the Heimlich maneuver, but instead of that, professionally elects to slap her on the back, but like really hard. While we were on our descent, somebody lurched over in the chair and became unresponsive, tachycardic, and diaphoretic. The whole episode lasted for about 2 minutes. Then he woke up and vomited. I figured he had an arrhythmia, and recommended he not take his connecting flight to Cleveland, and instead go to the air. Ems was waiting on the ground and helped him off the plane. I actually saw him again on my return flight home. He told me he was diagnosed with an arrhythmia, and made an appointment to see a cardiologist in our hometown. This is a somewhat frequent time for arrhythmias to present. I don't fly very often, but I've seen 3, maybe 4 of this type of thing on a flight. Please note, I'm not a doctor, but I'm going on the symptoms you mentioned. It was probably just a coincidence that it happened during descent. I'm currently a first-year resident, internal medicine in Sweden. This happened last year, about a year after I graduated, so I was still relatively fresh out of med school. I was flying home from my vacation from the Mediterranean, a 3-hour flight, when they announced on the speaker system that they were looking for a healthcare professional. Stood up when they called out a second time, maybe 15 seconds later. It was me and a bit older nurse who went up to the front rows where a middle-aged male was awake, but unresponsive. As I didn't really have a lot of experience and was somewhat panicking, kept the panic internally to myself. It's scary being alone. I fell back to ATLS and eventually noticed that I had AD problem. Decreased strength in one of his arms and one-sided facial droop that was quite mild. Long story short, I suspected a stroke but couldn't really do a whole lot. We were 30 minutes away from landing at the time of the initial call. They didn't deviate or anything. I didn't feel like I did that much, to be honest, except say that I suspected a stroke and asked if they could call an ambulance to the airport. The airplane seemed to land a bit faster than it usually does, and as we went off the runway, there was an ambulance waiting off the taxiway. When the ambulance staff boarded the plane, I gave a short report and that's basically it. I got a thank you from the relatives and the stewardesses. They asked me to write down my name and email, but I haven't heard anything since. I'm not a doctor, but I'm a nurse. Just yesterday morning, I heard these women screaming in the hallway of my hotel, "We need help. Does anyone know CPR?" I ran out the door and told these women I was a nurse. They took me to the front lobby where they found a young woman who seemed to have overdosed. She wasn't breathing, but she had a pulse at first. It started to get weaker, then stopped altogether. I had to do 4 rounds of CPR before I felt a pulse again, and it was right as the EMTs were walking in. I work in nursing homes and most people are DNRs. I've never had to do CPR on anybody. It's crazy, that was my first time and it was at a ducking hotel and not even work. Then you just so happened to ask this question, lol. You're amazing, she was so lucky you were there. Thank you for watching, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want more.